everyone. Thank you so much for joining us another episode at Safe Haven Sanctuary. Today I have the most beautiful Cassandra. Cassandra is the owner of Finch School of Alignment, and she's a healer and guide to high achievers and business owners. She's absolutely amazing. I have had the honor of accessing her services as well, and we did an energy healing. And it was absolutely life changing. I literally felt different after the session. I went through it, like there was a lot of emotional stuff that came up, but it was amazing. And the way that you helped me through it was absolutely phenomenal. So thank you. I'm so excited to
Oh,
have
well,
you here.
thank you so much for having me here, Sam, and also for just being so open about the session that you've had with me too. I really appreciate it.
No, of
Yeah.
course, of course. So
Yeah.
I first would like all of our listeners to know kind of exactly what you do. I mean, I know what you do, but if you kind of want to explain in your own words, like how you approach healing in a different way than like the regular average healer.
Well, this is going to be fun because I really notice patterns. So even though I'm working with energy, I'm also very well versed in anatomy and physiology, in all the types of energetics, into like the mind and spiritual components. So connecting with people more in that empathetic way. So understanding like how people's past can really affect them, but not just in their present life, but also past lives, their genetics. I take everything as a whole. And every session is tailored uniquely to that individual and priority on what they need to work through. It has nothing to do with what I think or what they need. And then I just allow
Mhm.
myself to be open for whatever comes through for them and for what they personally need.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I can say firsthand that it's like it was so much in detail my session with you. I was like, well, I remember even telling you, I'm like, I've never had a session like this before. Because
Yeah.
literally you covered everything, like the physical, the mental, the energetics, and you're so well versed in where certain things come up for people in the body and what it actually like means on an energetic level as well too, like the connecting the energetics and physical. So like I would love for you to kind of share more about that in a sense, because I guess our listeners are survivors of trauma. So, what do you see like most physical symptoms that actually come up for survivors of trauma?
It's usually,
Specifically, yeah, sorry,
oh,
go
sorry. No, you go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, I think a lot of my audience is women, but I also like I have so much compassion for men who are also trying to heal. So yeah, if you could speak to both and like and also highlight the differences of what you see.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love this. So when it comes to women who have survived a lot of different types of trauma, and also like I'm a woman who's also survived tons of trauma in my life as well. And how I notice that it affects you, like on a physical level, the most common areas of storage for those emotions and experiences is really in the connective tissue, in the feminine reproductive system, like the endocrine system as well. These are very, very common places. And this is why so many women have things like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and other chronic conditions. They're the
Yeah.
most common because that's where they actually store those pain points and why it
Mhm.
keeps flaring up for the body to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
getting to the root of those things are always so incredibly important. But for men as well, I notice they have very specific areas that they store things, like their shoulders, their lower back. I have
Mm.
yet to meet a man that does not have lower back issues. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
And
I
then,
mean, that makes so much sense because like
yeah,
they're the providers, right? They're carrying so much of this heavy weight and responsibility, right?
of
So,
course.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I love body psychology because it really highlights those areas of where they feel like they need to be the pillar of support, but then they don't have that support system in place for themselves and they take everything on. And then their spine starts to deteriorate over time.
Yeah, yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And like, so what do you think that, like, for males specifically, what do you think that they need as a healthy foundation in order to either release or avoid having these physical symptoms come up on, like, I
It's
mean, like, I guess like a physical and emotional level as well, too.
totally is to
Yeah.
actually address the types of beliefs and conditioning that they grew up with. How do they view their father, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of these men, they either have fathers that either worked really hard and have those belief systems that you have to work hard and work yourself to the bone, almost work yourself to death in order to succeed, and
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with working hard, but it's your perception and lens of what that means. So how the father presented
Yeah.
themselves. I've also seen men with these wounds that had like lazy fathers so that they went in the opposite direction, not wanting to
Yeah.
be like that, right? And then also too, it's like looking at the grandfather and going further back because when you start looking at where these belief systems originate, it's usually not within like one generation. It's usually coming from previous generations that actually dealt with things like war, dealt
Yeah.
with like really deep hardships. So it made sense for them to believe that. But when we
Yeah.
look at now and all the different possibilities and opportunities, especially now in the Western world, it's not necessarily true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the what I see coming up too is like just a lot of self-sacrificing,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And I guess like too, like where do you think self-sacrificing shows up in the body? I know it can show up in so many places, but yeah, for men and women, I mean, I know with the clients that I work with, like I see it so much in women's like hips area, their sacral area, and like in their heart center too. So
Yeah. Those
yeah,
are the two main areas that I see as well. It's mostly stems from the heart, right? Because
yeah,
then they start to sacrifice their own boundaries, their own sense of self-respect, their own needs. And same with the sacral, because that's your creational energy. And if you're constantly
yeah.
sacrificing what's really aligned for you specifically, because you're afraid of not being able to provide or whatever the case may be, you start taking away from that sacral energy.
Yeah, yeah. Was there a point in your life, because I would love for people to hear about your story and how you got into this work, because the way that you speak about it, I mean, it's obvious you're so well versed in it, but you're so passionate about it. And I think too that's what sets you aside from so many other people is like you really care. You can feel that in your content without even being a client of yours. Like you can really feel that, right?
Thank
And
you.
so I would
Yeah.
really love for people to know about your story and like if there was parts of your story where at one point you were self-sacrificing or and just even like the trauma that you survived. So yeah, you can tell
Yeah.
the whole story. We're all
I'll
here to
try,
listen.
I'll try to
We're
give you
all
the
ears.
Coles notes because I don't think there's enough time in a day to go over my life experience. I could write probably 4 books on it,
You should.
honestly. But just starting with the basics, I went through like a lot of sexual trauma at a young age.
Yeah.
And I had also dealt with some issues in the family, right? So some people in our family had addiction issues, and like maybe they won't realize it, but alcohol was a huge problem for many people in my family.
Yeah.
Um, so my parents were also very stressed, because my dad was the main provider. He worked full time. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. It wasn't easy for them, although they did the very best that they absolutely could at the time. But,
Yeah.
they were very stressed. And as a child, you can feel that. And then you start to
Oh,
feel
100.
like a burden because, if I wasn't here, they wouldn't have to provide for me, and it wasn't
Mm,
necessarily anything that was said to me. It was more so just feeling that deep stress and also
yeah.
going through trauma with other people, different people in the family, but then also having weird reactions from the family. And then fast forward to feeling like my needs weren't important. I had to sacrifice my needs so everyone else could be okay.
Yeah.
And also not having any real support when I went through that sexual trauma. Because I even remember, like, full on the whole conversation that was had right in front of me. And I was about 4. And
Oh,
they had
wow.
said that I was too young to remember. So just ignore that it ever happened. So I didn't
Oh
get any
my
support or
goodness.
help. And that conversation still plays, well, it doesn't anymore, but it used to play like almost daily my whole life,
Of
hearing
course.
that
Yeah.
and then just feeling let down and unimportant, like just being brushed aside and trying to suppress everything that I had gone through, and then by the
Yeah.
time I was 15, I was drinking all the time, I was skipping school. It didn't matter that I had almost straight A's, like I was doing very stupid things as a
Hmm.
teenager, like we would um sneak out of my friends' houses and go to crazy parties, and I don't even know how I'm still alive with the dumb things that I've done. you
Yeah.
know, but I've also
Yeah.
been drugged more than a couple of times. Like nothing
Wow. Okay.
happened, thankfully. I had
Yeah.
some sort of protection in place where it didn't go as far as it definitely could have. But yeah, I dealt with that. And then we had like 4 severe car accidents, you know?
Yeah.
So then my physical body was just not doing well. And by the time I was 16, I had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah,
16.
16.
Wow.
Yeah,
See, that just goes to show how your trauma carries in your body, right?
it does.
And I think too, like I wanted to go back to something that you said around the conversation. And it was like said right in front of you, but like I can only also imagine like the lack of feeling protected
Yeah.
and in a sense provided for, like emotionally provided for. Like that must have been so horrible. And probably, I mean, like you mentioned that you were drinking at a really young age, and like I can only imagine that that contributed, like that those experiences contributed to those behaviors in your teenage years, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
how common was emotional intelligence back in like the
Yeah.
mid 90s and early 2000s? Like it really
Yeah.
wasn't in my family. So I know people are
Yeah.
just doing what they think they should be, repeating the same patterns. But no, I didn't feel like I was protected. I didn't even feel like I could protect myself. And I don't think that's something a child should ever
No,
feel, you know?
never. Never,
But
no.
that's exactly what went through my mind is that I'm not protected, I'm not safe. And
Yeah.
that's been a whole problem until, obviously now it's not that. But even by the
Yeah.
time I was 21, I was dealing with like low grade, like cancer change in my cervix,
Oh my
like,
goodness.
so I had a lot of different health issues. Like I was also anemic, I wasn't sleeping, I
Yeah.
had insomnia. I had issues with my metabolism. I gained like 60 pounds in the span of 2 months when nothing changed with my diet or exercise. And they couldn't figure out why. And I've struggled up until this year to actually lose that type of weight. So it's been
Yeah.
insane. So I know how this affects women's bodies and how it affects their self-esteem, how it affects their people-pleasing dynamics, because that
Mm,
becomes a form of control.
for
Like
sure.
if I act in a certain way, then I will be safe. It's not always just about reward in the typical way people
Yeah.
think. Being safe is like a reward when you've never been safe, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and too, like that resonates so deeply is like when you're in people pleasing, like sometimes it's actually not about even pleasing the other person. It's like a safety mechanism,
It
right?
is.
Like it's about like protecting yourself because that's the only way you kind of knew how to, right?
Yeah. It's avoiding conflict.
Yeah. So how did you come out of all of this? Like it's like years and years of trauma at
Yeah.
like crucial
Half my life.
ages. Yeah. At like crucial ages too, where like your sense of self is being developed, right? Like how I know it's through the work that you do, but like if you could go into more depth of like certain steps that you take and like what didn't work for you that typically like you see in the mainstream industry being promoted, because I think that's important for us to talk about. Of like
Totally. Quick
what,
fixes. If anything's
yeah,
touted as a quick fix, you can just disregard that.
yeah,
I've tried everything under the sun
yeah,
to like fix myself, to lose weight, to do this
yeah.
or that. Um, but really, what didn't work for me and kind of how I got out of this was I was a terrible person. Because of my trauma, I
Oh,
didn't trust anybody
yeah.
and I didn't open myself up at all. I wasn't able to receive, and I thought I was a good person. But then I started
Mm,
looking at how I was treating my friends, how I was treating those closest to me. I didn't
yeah,
actually care about other people's feelings because no one cared about mine. That was my
yeah,
perspective, right?
yeah,
So I thought I cared about them, but then I realized like there was a lot of times where I was just using them as a distraction, where I was going against my own morality in order to receive attention. And I unintentionally hurt some people in my life. I lost one of my
yeah.
best friends of 7 years. She just ghosted me out of nowhere. And now it's been like 13 years and we still have never crossed paths or even talked.
Oh
It's
wow, that's
crazy.
heartbreaking.
But yes, but it's what actually got me to realize that, hey, I need to actually start self-reflecting because I never did. I
Yeah.
always saw myself as the victim because that's all I ever was.
Mm-hmm.
But upon self-reflection, I started to see how my actions could actually be very hurtful to other people. And sure, that should be obvious, but when that's never been taught to you, it was like a whole new revelation. I'm like, whoa, I'm actually being a
Yeah.
shitty friend and a shitty person.
Yeah.
So that's when I started realizing I needed to make a change within myself. And beyond the normal steps of just thinking before I act, that's actually when one of my other friends was actually sick and tired of hearing me complain about my lower back pain. That's what I had because
Yeah.
I was constantly in like this overt masculine state. Now, masculinity is not negative, but I was using it as protection, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I was holding on to all the responsibilities. I was holding on to taking care of people that were fully capable of doing things for themselves. But I would constantly step in, put
Yeah.
out all these fires for people, and
Yeah.
sacrifice myself.
Like the
And
savior complex and like kind of like in like hypermasculinity a
exactly,
little bit, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So being in this state, I was in so much body pain. And like I mentioned, I had all these other diagnoses. And my
Mhm.
friend had started learning energy work, and she's like, just come see me. She's like, let me
Mhm.
try this out on you because I'm still learning. I would love to give you a session. And I don't even remember what came up except for one thing. And it's not even emotionally based. It was the work that I had at the time. We had to use headsets that
Okay.
were wireless, and they had these little battery packs that we had to wear.
Yeah.
So I was a manager at a restaurant, and we had to communicate via these headsets through the back and front of team. And that's what came up that was affecting my kidneys as like an EMF disturbance.
Oh,
That's
okay,
why my back
okay.
hurt.
Yeah.
Because I was like bent over in pain after 5 hours of being at work, and I had to be there for 9 or 10. And then I
Mhm.
was working like 50, 60 hours a week, and having to
Yes.
be bedridden the whole time after work was just not okay being 20 years old. I'm like, no, I want to enjoy life. I don't want to feel like I'm
Yeah.
80, you know?
Yeah, of course.
So we worked with that. I think we worked with some trauma pieces as well. I can't quite remember the details, but I remember a day after that session, my back pain was gone, and I haven't had it since.
No way. After
Yeah,
one session.
one session. I was like, what is this? And I just
Yo,
knew
that's
at that moment I had
crazy.
to learn. Within a month, I
Yeah.
started learning myself. Within 2 years, I quit my corporate job. And here we are 13 years later, and I'm still doing it. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that you've been doing this for 13 years.
Yeah, since I was 22, which was around 2011.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's been a
It's
while.
been a while. Well, that explains why you're so convicted in your work and why you're so
Yeah.
well versed in it.
Yeah, because I
Wow.
only work through like personal experience, Like
Yeah.
I work with people who've been through similar things because that's what I really know really well.
Yeah. And this energy work that your friend did on you, was it just like her own kind of like I know like energy work is like such a broad word.
It is.
And like I love that there's certain modalities, but I also too believe that people can do energy work in their own way, that they don't necessarily always have to follow a specific modality.
Totally.
Like I
And
don't
that's
like it's intuitive based and like especially like when you're super connected, like you can make shit happen. So I'm wondering like
exactly.
yeah, did your friend follow a specific modality or was it just like
She did.
intuitive based? Okay,
Yeah.
what modality was it?
So the modality she did was body talk, and
Okay.
that's the one that I'm trained in. I'm also an
Okay.
advanced practitioner and also
Nice.
a instructor for that modality as well.
Yeah.
And I'm also trained in all the levels of Reiki. And I'm also been a Reiki teacher for 10 years. So I have different perspectives to draw on, but I kind of
Yeah.
use my knowledge of everything in my sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. Trust me. It was fully multi-layered. I was like, whoa, like what is happening?
Yeah.
Even in the session, I'm pretty open to talking about this, but like even in the session, I just want to rave about it just because it literally was like it was pivotal for me and it just happened a few weeks ago. It was just a few weeks ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was only like 2, 3
Two,
weeks.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
And literally, like, I felt like a different person. I mean, I had to like go through it after, like, because lots of emotional stuff
of
manifests into some
course.
physical things. But like, it's real. Like, and I say this for people who think like energy work is like super woo woo. And I mean, like, I'm all about being woo woo, so I don't give a fuck. But
Yeah, me too. I'm like,
I
I'll
don't
be
give
as out there
a
as
fuck.
you
Yeah,
want.
I am a little witchy witch. I don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like it actually fucking works. seriously, like I did an energy healing session on a client, and she'd never done it before. Thank God she was like super open to it. Same with her. Like
Amazing.
she's like, I feel so different after. And I'm like, yeah, like
Yeah.
this is what is missing in mainstream therapy. Because so like
Yes.
I was like a clinical counselor therapist before.
No way.
And I was like, I've been in the field for 10 years. And if I didn't have my spirituality and like was not introduced to this side of the healing, I feel like I would be in such a completely different place, because I think that there's certain aspects from mainstream therapy that like things like this, like energy healing. Like I
Yeah.
don't think I'd ever, unless the person brought it up to me individually, but like I wouldn't ever be able to actually bring that up in a session like, hey, do you want to try some energy healing? Like it wouldn't technically be ethical. And I think that's what's so beautiful about having your own business too, is like being able to be creative with the gifts that God and Source has given you, and be
Agreed.
able to share it with people who are in like dire need of it. You know what I mean? Like, so
Exactly. It's like I
yeah.
love talk therapy. Don't get me wrong. There's always
Mhm.
a time and a place for all of this.
Yeah.
But I feel like everything has to work in conjunction, like the spirituality, the mental, the physical, the emotional.
Yeah.
And there has to be ways in order to release that and get your inner body on board with the changes being made.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can talk yourself like in circles, you know?
Well, yeah, like that's the thing is, and I found that I was doing that. I sometimes still do that. It still comes up for me too, because I have so much feelings inside sometimes, and I just like need to like express it. But there has to be a point where I'm just like, fuck, like I gotta fucking stop talking about this and like get into my body, because like too much conceptualization, it's not helpful. Like
It's not.
it's not like, and having self-awareness in its own is, it's a great first step, but being self-aware is just one part of it. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like the first step and also the last step. I always tell my
Hmm.
clients, like, when you have an emotion, do not analyze it. Do
Yeah.
not analyze it. Get into feeling first, because most people are
Yeah.
disconnected from their bodies. So feel it
Yeah.
and where it is in your body. And then once you've done that and you breathe through it and you've taken that time and space, then once it's processed, then you can analyze it if you choose
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
understand where it came from and why. But do not do that as the start, because then you distract yourself and then you're like, oh no, I understand why. And I'm just going to go on with my day. And it stays hidden in your system.
Exactly. And it comes up like in these subtle subconscious beliefs, like in these subtle like subconscious thoughts, like when you're just kind of doing mundane things. And like I think
Yeah.
a lot of people too, I mean, I really love mindset work, but I think a lot of people too don't actually track like what their subconscious thoughts are. Like the other day I was just going into my fridge, and I had a belief that came up that was not for my highest and greatest good. And I actually caught it. I was like, oh, like this is what you're actually thinking on like a subconscious level. And I just cleared
Yeah.
it and replaced it with like now I'm like fully aware of it, and if have integrated a new belief system around that. But it's like, yeah, like we can't like, I forgot my train of thought, but fucking forgot my train of thought. We went from being in the body to mindset.
Yeah,
It's all good.
totally.
It's all good. Oh yeah, okay. I wanted to ask you something. Okay,
Yeah.
so you spoke about how you urge your clients to not analyze the emotion and to get into their body. So like how would you recommend someone to get into their body? Because like I see this being thrown around so much on the online space, and no one's, I don't see like that it's like fully being shown properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like what would you recommend?
Various ways. My favorite is always just starting with the breath first. And you don't have to go into like any crazy type of breath work. You can
Yeah.
literally just start with breathing in through your nose
Hmm.
and letting it fill your abdomen. Most people
Yeah.
breathe in reverse because they're not
Hmm.
trained how to properly breathe. So I'm like, breathe in, fill the
Yeah.
abdomen, take it slow, and then release.
Yeah.
I also have a breathing technique that's, people can do at nighttime to help them sleep. But usually that's where people start, is actually breathing
Yeah.
and then asking themselves, where is it in your physical body?
Hmm. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think you're so right about the breathwork part, because it's crazy. Like obviously like our bodies are breathing for us, but this one thing that we're supposed to do naturally, we're not doing it like a lot of people are not doing it properly.
Right?
This
And that
this
blew my
vital
mind.
source, like, doesn't it? Yeah, and I was guilty of it before as well too. And
Same.
I even have to like catch myself sometimes too, where I'm just like, fuck, like I'm not breathing right. I'm not breathing right now. I'm like holding my breath, right?
Right?
Yeah, but it's funny because so I was being trained in Ayurveda, and they emphasize this so much. I learned this from my teacher, and she's like, yeah, like we're like this thing that we're born with, like it's the first thing that we literally do when we come out of the womb, and we don't even know how to do it properly. Right? And
Right.
like and that people hear breath work and they're just like, okay, like yeah, like I've done it, and it's just like, okay, but like have you actually done it properly and like simplified it too? Because I mean, I
Exactly.
think there's so many great breath works out there, but sometimes we just need a simple one to come back to, which is kind of what you said, like, which is like, you know, breathing, like it was breathing into the diaphragm, you said, right? Like
Yeah,
diaphragm,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. um and you can literally do it anywhere, but people think like, I mean, based on my experience, like a lot of people are like, oh, like breathwork doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, are you practicing it? Like, are you devoting practice to it? Because, like you said, like there's no quick fixes. There's no quick
No.
fixes, especially when it comes to training your breath too. If you have been in survival mode your whole life, you're probably holding your breath. You're probably not breathing properly,
Yeah.
you know, or there's like, it's like a lot of shallow breathing, right? And we have to train ourselves again, or maybe not again, like just train ourselves if we haven't been taught how to, right? So
Absolutely. And the
yeah.
interesting thing with that as well is that the breath represents how much we take in life. So when you talk about
Mm.
survival, most people, when they do breathe, is very shallow.
Yeah.
So when they start breathing into their diaphragm, they're like, oh, why does it hurt down here? Why can't I get it
Mm,
actually deep
yeah.
into the abdomen? And that's how you know you've been in survival.
Yeah.
And also, if you're just going about your day, then all of a sudden you're like, it's because you've been holding your breath and now you're
Yeah.
actually allowing the release. The amount of sighs that people have throughout the day because they're not breathing is crazy. And
Yeah.
that blew my mind because that's what I used to do all the time.
Yeah. I've actually never heard of that, like this sighing part. Like I knew sighing was a part of an
Yeah.
emotional release in somatics, but I never actually thought about that in the way that you just explained it, where like you're probably holding your breath for a long period throughout the day, and then like your body is just like, okay, like I need to let up and sigh.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I've never
Because
heard of that.
I used to do that all the time. My friends would be
Yeah.
like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I didn't even notice that I was doing it, but all of a sudden I'd be like, or
Yeah.
something like that. And they're like, "What's happening?" And then I made the connection, what I've been doing. I'm like, oh, I was not breathing. So my body's like,
Yeah.
breathe so we don't die,
Yeah.
or lose consciousness
I
and
know,
things like
right?
that. Because I'm sure all of you are like, I'm breathing because I'm alive. But in
Yeah.
reality, we're shallow breathing just enough to get through the day.
Exactly. Yeah, like
Yeah,
we're not taking in enough like proper air and oxygen. And you know, in yoga, like we call it like the vital source, like it's our vitality, right?
absolutely.
And it's not even just about like getting air into your lungs. It's actually about like getting it into like your what is it? Like your blood cells as well too.
Yeah,
Into your mind. Like literally air
all
is not
aspects.
just, yeah, it's not just going into your lungs. It's your brain needs air, your blood cells need it, like your whole body, right? So if like if
Your
you're,
diaphragm, in
yeah,
order
your
to
diet,
move,
yeah, exactly. Like even to, you know, I see
your
people at,
emotions. Yeah.
yeah, I see people at the gym sometimes too, and I'm like, all right, and I'm guilty of this too. Like sometimes I gotta catch myself, and I'm just like, are you breathing when you're working out? Like this,
Right? And that's why you feel terrible or why you're probably really,
yeah,
really sore for days and
yeah.
days because you haven't been breathing throughout your workout. You're just holding it tense and
Yeah.
tight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I noticed that too. Like the reason why I noticed in other people is because I was doing it myself too. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, I
Same.
gotta, yeah, I was like, I gotta start breathing. Like, why am I holding my breath so much? I already do that
Right.
enough outside of my workout.
Right.
And there's
Absolutely.
like different breath. I mean, for when I exercise, you know, it's a totally different breath work that I do opposed to, you know, what I'm trying to connect to, sorry,
Yep.
trying to activate my parasympathetic nervous system as
Yeah.
opposed to my sympathetic nervous system when I'm exercising, because like I mean, like kind of when you're working out, your body is almost in a sense going into survival mode because like you're lifting heavy shit and like,
Yeah, it's in stress mode, but
yeah,
a good
yeah,
type.
a good, exactly.
Yeah,
And that's why we need that breath work too, to like make sure that it is a healthy type of stress, right? So,
exactly. And that's why a
yeah.
lot of the breath work during exercise is a lot less deep,
Hmm.
because it's helping that type of your nervous system, like the sympathetic, actually keep up with the adrenaline that it needs.
Yeah.
And then when you're done the workout, that's when you go back to like really deep breathing. So you're signaling that it's over and your body can rest and repair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, and I always encourage my clients too because I'm super big on like moving your body and exercising, but I'm just like, hey, like
Yes.
after like you got to make sure that you do some like softer breath work because otherwise like you're just going to be like in like high anxiety after too. Like that's how I was. That's
Yeah.
honestly how I was. I was like, "Oh my goodness, like why do I feel so anxious after this workout?" And like super like on edge. And I was like, "Okay, like I got to get into like my parasympathetic nervous system." So, yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
like one last bit on
Yeah.
breathing as well is that other than it being very physical, it also represents like how, like I mentioned earlier, like how we take it in life. So if you've been through a
Mhm.
lot of trauma and a lot of things, there's like a part of your body that views even breathing and taking in stuff around you as danger. So that's why people breathe in a
Mm.
very shallow way and why their body restricts that level of breathing. So they feel like they're not taking in all of the stress and all the trauma and all of the bad stuff, but at the same time, you're not taking in any of the good stuff. So it's that reframe around the breathing that you're not taking in all the negative stuff. You're taking in all the nourishment and what you actually need for yourself to function emotionally as well as physically. But that breath also disconnects how much you can connect with your emotions because the
Yeah.
diaphragm is actually what moves and mobilizes your emotions. And if you're not breathing, that's when they get stagnant.
This is so interesting. I've never heard that before, and I love the word that you use, nourishment.
Yeah,
Like that is such a powerful word because I think a lot of us, at least at some point in our journey, maybe not now, but I think a lot of us are craving that and not even really knowing that we're craving that because we've just been in the survival mode this whole time, right? And
exactly.
not even familiar with like what nourishment means, right? Like within ourselves
Exactly.
and even within relationships, which is actually what I want to transition into.
Yeah.
Both of our favorite subjects.
Let's go.
Okay, so, oh my gosh, okay. Nourishment and relationships. Like, let's just like segue in with that.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to know your history in relationships because also too, like the way that you talk about the divine feminine and divine masculine, it's like you're in people's heads. So, like literally, like the conscious woman and the conscious man who is looking for their conscious partner. Like it's like your content has like all of the highlights.
That's my jam.
I feel like you should start like a little like mixer for people.
That's what I want to do. That's
No
kind of like,
way! Oh
that's
my
been in
gosh.
my awareness to actually start hosting stuff like that, like online and in person.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well this is obviously a divine sign then. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh
Oh
my
God,
gosh.
that's so awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Um,
problem.
so my history with the relationships has been terrible. You know, so let's just segue into that, because of my trauma in my past, and okay, so even let's just quickly touch on how people get the sex talk in their early teens, right?
Mm.
So as a female, and I'm sorry to put my mom on blast here, but
Sorry,
but
mom.
literally, yeah, like I grew up with this conditioning in my head that men only want you for one thing. So when I started becoming like more into, that teenage years into puberty, like I was literally just told like don't have sex with boys.
Oh my
You know,
goodness, yeah.
just don't do it, right? Because they only want you for that and they don't actually care about you. That was my messaging. And I
So much
understand
fear around
why.
that.
Yeah, and I totally
Yeah.
understand why, my mom would say something like that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, boys, hormones, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But without the context, like this is literally all I thought that men didn't actually care about me.
Yeah.
So that's what I led into all my relationships with in a subconscious way. I didn't trust men. I
Yeah.
had no trust for them. So, of course, the men that I ended up choosing were very distrustful type of people. They had no integrity. Even though it
Hmm.
might have seemed like in the beginning, sure, they had so much integrity, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
because of underneath, I didn't actually trust men. I thought they were just going to use me. That's all I kept choosing were
Yeah.
men who would use me.
Well,
And
yeah, because of those subconscious beliefs, right? Like
exactly. So
you
it's
were
just
being drawn towards
reaffirming.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what felt normal and safe because that's all I've seen in the past, like
Yeah.
this is how they are. And when I started realizing that, like over the last couple of years, I realized as well that underneath that, because of what I was taught, because of what I've seen and what I've experienced, I had a lot of hate around the masculine, because
Mm.
my dad was very, very protective of me when I was growing up, but I would say in an excess,
Mm.
very excessive
Yeah.
controlling in that way, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I get it. He wants to keep me safe, but it was excessive.
Yeah.
So I also had a lot of resentment towards him in those ways. And I had a lot of resentment towards men in general because of my experiences. And I didn't realize that underneath all of it, and especially one that I was supposed to look up to and trust was the one that hurt me the most in my life.
Yeah.
I had nothing but hate in my system, even though consciously I'm saying, I love men. There's good men.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just want a good man. But I
Yeah.
can't when I have all this seething hate underneath and so much resentment towards them. I literally could not see the good men because of that.
Yeah, and I think too, like you mentioned, like this was a common word that you used was the distrust, right? And
Yeah,
like men are super intuitive too, and they can feel that.
they can.
Like literally, regardless if they're like a quote unquote conscious awakened man or not, like I feel like everybody's intuitive, and whether they're spiritual or not, like they can sense things. Like energy does not lie, right? And
Yeah,
so when men, and I know you know this already, but like like when men feel like they're not trusted too, like it definitely impacts the relationship and how they show up as well too, right? So
exactly. And this is why energy is so important to tune into, other
mhm.
than just the physical action. Because I was
Yeah,
married before and,
I didn't know
I
that.
am divorced.
Yeah,
And the thing is, like, when I look underneath it, he wasn't a bad man. We were just playing out our own wounds against each other.
yeah,
Like I was acting like the perfect wife.
yeah.
I would always check in and be like, how are you doing? And wanting to spend time. And he had a lot of wounds against the feminine because I had wounds against the masculine.
Hmm.
So it turned into resentment on both of our sides. Like he didn't really want to spend that much time with me, even though he would act like he kind of would, but he'd be very distracted, not present,
Yeah.
and I would start nitpicking little things because I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel secure because there
Mm,
was so much like wishy-washy type of behaviors.
yeah.
And there was a level of trust that just was not there. And there was reasons for that distrust too
Oh,
that came to
100%.
light. But
Okay.
the fact of the
Yeah.
matter was that there's a reason why we got together. It was a karmic bond, and we needed to
Yeah.
release that and work through that.
And so do you think that that's like after your divorce that you have like that you fully released that?
Yeah, absolutely. It took
Wow.
a while. It took a couple of years for sure,
Yeah.
but I realized where I was self-sacrificing.
Yeah.
And there was a point where I literally had to kind of choose between my purpose and, the
Mm-hmm.
family in a way.
Yeah.
And I just could not do it.
Yeah.
I could
No.
not leave this work behind.
No, like when you are meant to do this work, it's like even if you tried, it would eat at your soul.
And it
Like
did.
it,
I
yeah.
tried. I was a
Yeah.
stay-at-home mom,
Yeah.
but and I applaud all stay-at-home moms, okay? Like it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
hard job and it's not something that I think is wrong or bad, but it
Yeah.
just wasn't for
For
me. I
you,
needed
exactly.
something
Yeah.
more, not more, but that it couldn't be my only thing. And I
Yeah.
know in all reality, it's a very short stint of time. It's like
Mm-hmm.
18 years, maybe at the
Mm-hmm.
most. But I just couldn't not hold my mission and that at the
Yeah.
same time. I wanted both. So why do you have to choose?
Why
I
do you have to
want it
choose?
all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love what you said. I want it all, right? Like, just because I think as women, we're programmed to think that we have to choose or that
Yeah.
we're bad if we want to pursue our soul's purpose and be nurturers as well too, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned something too around not feeling safe and supported, which like I really want to expand on just because I mean, like I myself, as a survivor of trauma and sexual violence as well too, like that is something that I crave so deeply in relationships. Like I think it would probably be the number one thing is like safety, protection, support, feeling like obviously like I can take care of myself. I've been taking care of myself for years, but it's nice to have support. Obviously, like we need that.
Exactly.
We
We
need
do.
it. Like let's
We
just like
do.
not say that we don't need it. Like I'm never gonna be that woman where I'm just like I can do it all on my own, even though like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and
No,
it's like
thank you.
no, like I don't want to fucking do it all on my own. Fuck that shit.
And we shouldn't have to. Yeah. So the whole need aspect, people look at need like such a bad word.
Yeah, I
You know,
know.
they're like, oh, this is desperation. Well, if you're coming from that place, sure, but look up the meaning of need. Need is more of that sense of this is what's important, right? It has nothing to do with lack. It's actually, this is an essential, this is a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think of being safe and supported, yeah, that is like the absolute number one
Yeah.
actual need that we do have. And
Yeah.
if someone is like wishy-washy in any way, especially when it comes to the masculine, the feminine will never feel safe. You know, he
Oh,
might be married
yeah.
to you and still not choosing you. You know, the
Yeah.
physical thing does not mean they're actually committed to you and choosing you actively.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's an energetic as well. This is why I'm like, I'm all about energy because so many people are doing the physical things, but not the
Yeah.
energetics.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And
Yeah.
it's funny, like there's a story that comes up for me in regards to that. Like I almost got engaged to this guy that I was dating. Oh God, it was like such an unhealthy relationship on my part, as well too. Like
Of course.
I was not in a good place. But also he was not the greatest person to me as well. But like literally like we were looking at rings and like we were fighting so much and we just thought like I think it was more me like I was kind of pressuring him to get married. But I was like okay like once we get married everything's just gonna be fine or like or I'd be like
Yeah.
let's have a baby like let's just have a baby and like that's just gonna like bring us closer together and it's like no like
Right.
a ring a piece of paper a child like I mean children are amazing I love children so much but that does
Yeah.
not mean that that's gonna create
Ex
safety.
yeah.
Yeah it's not and it's
Or
not gonna affect
responsibility.
exactly yeah.
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 And I'm sure so many like can relate to that statement. Well, if we were married, then he'd be committed. If we were married,
Hmm.
then he would be choosing me. And it's not that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's huge energetics behind it and yeah I want to like let's talk about that in a little bit more depth. Let's talk about like infidelity in a little bit.
Ooh, this one's always a good
It's
one.
always a good one. Yeah. Okay, I'm so curious to hear your perspective on
Yeah.
infidelity. Okay, like so I mean I've worked with couples who
Oof.
have experienced infidelity and they've
Mm-hmm.
worked through it. Don't know how. I mean like I helped
Good
them
for
work
them,
through it. Good
but
for them, but me
I could not.
could not. Like
Yeah.
I would be like I would be anxious in bed the whole time if like anything he's doing and like and honestly I mean I've experienced infidelity before like that's
Me too.
why I know and um okay like this is just like another background story but like literally I was feeling like I was so insecure. I was like, holy shit, like I'm just insecure and like this is why this is coming up. Because like my ex would literally tell me that he'd be like, "Oh, like you're just so fucking insecure. And I'm like, fuck, like, okay, I gotta be
Yeah.
like the cool girlfriend, you know?
Totally.
And like, you know, like even when we talk about like sisterhood wounds, you know, I always felt like these these friends who were girls of his, I was like, okay, like I just gotta like be nice to them. Like it's me. Like, why do I have something against these women? And it wasn't that. Like I was literally my intuition being like, there's something
Yeah.
happening. Because literally, like after we broke up, he started dating the same girl that that
The issues were,
yeah.
yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, whatever. But like yeah, like I mean, like I just couldn't, and I couldn't go, like I could not be with someone after they they were unfaithful, like, so yeah, I was wondering if like you had the same perspective.
Yeah, so I do have the same perspective. And like, I know everyone's different for
Yeah, yeah,
sure. Like, people can repair, they can work on their trust and rebuild that and all that. And
yeah.
that's great.
Hmm.
But both people have to be fully on board, like,
Exactly.
very on board.
Yep.
And just for me personally, the reason why I was never able to forgive and move forward from infidelity was because there was no accountability.
Mm. Yeah.
They were just like, well, you weren't doing this or you were being like that, instead of
So
taking
much blame.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Exactly. Instead of them knowing that they're just looking for a distraction. They're
Yeah.
just trying to figure out a way to calm their nervous system, or that's the only way that they really feel connected, or it's their ego. There's so many different layers to infidelity, and it's
Yeah.
always an internal issue with that said person.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because like I feel like, I mean, if we can go back to like the divine and masculine feminine, or sorry, the divine, yeah, masculine feminine,
Yeah.
um, like someone who is in their divinity, if they're feeling like they're not happy in the relationship, they're going to express that. And I feel like they will exit the relationship before doing that. And I know people make mistakes, like,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
get that piece, but I just feel like that's what like a healthy person would do, right? Instead of like
Agreed.
deflecting and like projecting their own shit and not taking responsibility, right? Because it is a deeper issue. I I always think like there's like a void that they're trying to fill, like from their
Exactly.
childhood, like
Like an emptiness.
yeah, an
Hmm.
emptiness, or like even too like having something against, well, whatever sex that they're interested in, but like
Yeah.
let's just use heterosexual couples as an example. But like, if a man is unfaithful to a woman, like I truly believe that there is a deep mother wound there,
I agree.
and vice versa. I mean, it could
Hmm.
it could be like a deep parental wound, like maybe not mother, maybe it's father wound too, and they're using this as a way to kind of take their power back, or to feel safe, or to protect themselves in a way, and it's just like happening so
And
like
validate themselves.
yeah. And
Yeah.
like but like also too, like I just think about that and I'm like, that can't feel good. Like I'm sure it doesn't.
Temporarily,
Yeah, like
maybe.
temporarily, but men feel deeply as well too. Like even the ones who put on that front, and they're like they look all hard, like those are the ones who like actually I think
They're
feel
like the big teddy bears.
yeah, like they
Yeah,
feel the deepest,
they do.
because that front is it's a shield, it's a protection,
It
right?
is.
um and so where was I going with this? But oh god, lost my train of thought. It's gone. It's gone. It'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah. Well, this reminds me of a personal story. And usually, when people are just trying to make a relationship work, but it's highly one-sided, maybe, or,
Mhm.
it's just not working and they're just sacrificing and going with the motions. Like a couple of years ago, someone I considered a really good friend actually sent me like an inappropriate nude photo, and he was in a relationship. Like,
Oh
he
my
was with this
goodness.
person for over 10 years, he have kids,
Wow, okay.
and I was really upset by this.
Of
And I
course.
said, one, don't ever send me that again.
Yeah.
But two, it was interesting that he had such low self-esteem and such a
Hmm.
low viewpoint of himself, because him and his partner hadn't been intimate in well over a year and a half. And she
Okay.
would constantly like push him away. And again, like, it's not an excuse, but you could
Hmm.
see where he was just putting up with things, not setting boundaries, and being kind of passive in his relationship. And in order to
Yeah.
feel better about himself, he reached out to somebody else instead of dealing
Hmm.
what was going on at home. So this is
Yeah.
why I say it's always a distraction,
Yeah.
always trying to take yourself out of what it is that you're personally feeling instead of actually dealing with what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's when our work comes into play, where we get to like that deep rooted cause.
Yeah.
And I think
Face those wounds.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
know. And I think like I mean not for everyone, but I just see this pattern with people who are really scared to face their wounds because they think it's hard work. And I mean like I'm not gonna lie, like
It
it fucking
is.
is. It is, but like
Facing your shadow, that's not easy.
it's not. It's really not. And like you will go through it. There's gonna be a
Yeah.
phase. Like there was a phase where I was going through it and I was just like I did not like myself. I was like, holy
Yeah,
shit.
I
Um,
agree.
but it's so worth it when you come out on the other side of it, just because you start to value things in such a different way, like
Yeah.
yourself and even like what you want in relationships. You know,
Yeah.
even I mean, I see this too a lot here where I live, but you know, there's a lot of people just kind of sleeping around and like I'm not here to like sex shame anybody at all, but for me, like personally, it's like sex is so sacred
It is.
and it's like I don't want to just like I don't want just anybody inside of me. Like,
Exactly.
first of all, I need to know, I need to like be able to like see what's happening for you energetically before that is going inside of me. Because
Exactly.
I mean, like when we come into sacred union, I mean, we're exchanging energies, and it's like, well, like I feel like people are not really aware of that part, or people who
Yeah.
have maybe not gone through their awakening process yet are not aware of that, and they're just, you know, opening themselves up to and I've been there, trust me, like I've been there. But they're like opening themselves up to all these things that are not theirs, like they're starting to carry other people's darkness and even like other people's traumas
Yeah.
as well too, and then they start to wonder
Hmm.
like shit, like why do I feel so heavy, and like why do I feel like shit about myself, and I mean this in such a loving way, but it's like, okay, like, well, are you actually in alignment with your self-respect, with like what you actually want for yourself? Do you really want to be sharing yourself with so many people, or like again, like what we said, like is that just something that is there to like fill a void of a wound
Exactly.
that you're not really willing to look at, right? Because
Exactly.
when you experience conscious relationship, when you experience like even conscious and sacred sexual intimacy, there's no going back after that. Like, and and
No.
and,
One night
and
stands are like, oof.
no, yeah, and not even sacred intimacy with another person, but like even with yourself too. Because like once you experience sacred intimacy with yourself, like not even just on a sexual level, but really learning to really love yourself, all the parts of yourself, it's like you start to really value who comes into your energetic field, and you start to
Exactly.
value who you're allowing access to your life, and being really picky, like that's another thing too, is like be picky, guys. Okay, just wanna like be discerning, be picky, especially about your relationships, because
Yeah.
that not only affects the way that you show up energetically as well too, but like this is your future, especially when it comes to choosing your partner. Like you're not, and for those people who want to have children as well too, like you're not just choosing your partner. Like think
Yeah.
about think about your future kids, if that's something that's, that you want for yourself,
Exactly.
right? And the
Exactly.
life that you want to cultivate for your family,
Yep,
right?
absolutely. I agree. There's so much that
Yeah.
goes into that, and you really need to be discerning. And I've seen so much on there where they're like, oh, people are just too picky. And it
Hmm.
depends on what you mean by that. Because some
Yeah.
people could be like, oh, well, he's not 6'3" in
Yeah. Yeah.
finance, but blue eyes, so I don't want it. Like he's not at least
Yeah.
like 6 foot, so I'm just
Yeah.
gonna throw it all out. So
Yeah.
preferences are fine, okay?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
have your preference, but people don't even focus on the important aspects before they get in
Hmm.
partnership. They don't focus
Yeah.
on the healthy qualities they're looking for in their partner
Hmm.
and also how they feel with them.
Yeah,
And is their vision of the future in line with yours?
exactly.
You trust their sight.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's such an important thing because so many will become the passenger in their own life and let someone
Hmm.
else take the wheel because they think this is what they should be doing.
Yeah.
They should just respect any person and their plans and not take into consideration their actual needs and what they
Hmm.
want out of their life. And I say
Yeah.
this because this was me. That's why I got married to the wrong man, you
Yeah.
know? Not because he was bad, but he had a different sight than I, and I just was
Hmm.
not tuned in enough to what I actually really wanted. And it
Yeah.
helped me refine that process. So, really, you need to know what it is that you actually want in your future before discerning what man fits that
Hmm.
picture for you.
Yeah. No, I agree. And something important that you said is like how you feel with them, right? Like a lot of people
Yeah.
too, like someone can tick off all the boxes that you have on your list. Like it's so great. Like, I mean, have your list, definitely, like,
Yeah.
because that's going to help with manifesting your person and getting
But have your
clear.
list of you
Yeah,
too.
exactly. Have your list of you too, and like really notice like how your body physically feels when you're in the presence of them. Like
Yep.
you will know. You will know like your
Oh,
nervous
yeah.
system will feel safe. And then I know some practitioners will be like, especially for people who have undergone so much trauma, um, I've had practitioners say like, like your nervous system may not feel safe too because of all the trauma you've been through. But I mean, based on my experience, like, and maybe because like I'm super intuitive as well too, or just like, no, like I fucking know. Like
Exactly.
I'm not gaslighting my intuition anymore. Like I fucking know.
Exactly.
I
Right. And
Yeah.
I did the same thing. That's why I thought I needed to stick it out with people because it was a me
Hmm.
problem. But my body physically rejected my
Yeah.
partners that were not healthy for me.
Yeah.
And now, like being with the person I'm with now, my body does not reject him at all in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form. It's
Yeah.
bizarre, like even like not to get TMI or anything, but like with my
Get
previous
TMI,
partners,
girl. I love TMI.
like I couldn't even like there were certain tastes I just could not handle. It just
Yeah.
was not happening. And now that's not even a thing,
Yeah.
So like not just the pheromones, but also the taste, like the body tastes and
Hmm.
things like that are so unique. And if you're not in a partnership where it feels safe and there's that level of trust, you
Hmm.
will reject them on all levels.
Yeah. No, it's so fucking true because like even after intimacy with someone,
Yeah.
if you notice how your body feels after, woo,
Mm-hmm.
like I literally felt an imbalance with someone that I was intimate with, and because like literally like you said, like it was physically rejecting them, I felt this imbalance in my sacral area, and like even like we're gonna get TMI on here, but like even like the liquid I was like leaking, I was like, oh my god, this just doesn't feel like it's me,
Yeah.
like it was like it felt gross, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, shit, like that's my body literally rejecting this person because I did not feel
Yeah.
good in the moment. I didn't feel good after. So
Yep.
I hear exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was
Yeah.
still, able to like have an orgasm and things like
Mm-hmm,
that.
mm-hmm.
But then like the amount of pain, like before, sometimes even during, but then
Yeah.
even after, and just
Yeah.
how my body, like you mentioned, responded after the fact.
Yeah.
Oh my. I was like, why is this happening?
And people
Just
normalize that.
right.
That's the
And they're
thing.
like, oh, it's just my problem. There's something wrong with me. Instead of
Yeah.
realizing this is probably just not the right dynamic.
Yeah. They either categorize it as like it's a them problem or that like it's a woman problem because our bodies are
Yeah.
like so complex, right? And it's like,
Right.
no, like our bodies are so fucking intelligent. Your body's fucking talking to you.
Right.
Like, yeah.
You don't need like some weird thing because your body's not producing,
Yeah.
some sort of lubrication. Like
Hmm.
that was an issue of mine before. Like I was not producing pretty much any of that. And
Yeah.
now it's like it just doesn't stop. Sorry, I hope no family is listening to this.
That's the best when it doesn't stop. Oh,
Yeah, it's
it's like
great.
And it just shows too, like how much healing you've done on yourself, and it's so nice to hear that you're in like a conscious relationship where you can literally surrender. Like even going
Yeah,
back to that statement of like it just like it doesn't stop. It's like because your body feels safe for it to be in that state. You know what I mean?
exactly. It feels so safe and sure. Like it
Yeah.
varies, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's like never dry anymore.
Yeah.
My drive is never low,
Yeah.
like, and there's such a level of safety too, where he can be more dominant, but it's
Hmm.
not in a weird, aggressive way,
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah.
soft, gentle, but also very, very
Yeah.
dominating. Like, it's such a weird dynamic that I've never
It's like
experienced.
a
And I'm
it's
like,
like
whoa,
a it's like a nice masculine way. I know what you're talking about.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, sure, grab my hair, but then like gently release and then just be
Yeah.
super amazing.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you finally get
Yeah.
into that level of safety and trust. It's like
Yeah.
that they're very strong, but you also know that they're going to be very safe and gentle with you at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I love that. I love that for you just because, like, I mean, I know what it feels like to be a survivor of, sexual violence, and
Yeah.
to actually feel safe in sex is a fucking gift after that, literally.
Absolutely.
Like,
Like a
it's,
whole other level of
yeah,
surrender.
yeah.
Mhm.
But it
So
just,
it is very possible.
yeah, and thank you for saying that just because I know there's so many listeners who are survivors of sexual violence and feel like and they just kind of feel like it's not going to happen for them, right? But like
Like you'll
this
never
is
enjoy it again.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like that's not true at all because
No.
but also too it's like you got to be willing to do the work. You can't
Yeah.
expect it to just like happen and continue in the patterns that you've been repeating, and it's not to shame anybody at all. Like, I mean, we've both been there in our journeys, right? And I mean, there's layers to everyone's journey. Like, none of us are
Of
perfect,
course.
but like, yeah, like you got to do the work if you want to feel good in all aspects of your life. And I think intimacy is one of the most important aspects of like just even like relationship connection, because it's the most vulnerable you will ever be with someone. Like, you're literally naked and they are inside of you, or you're, you know, inside of
Yeah.
them. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Um,
agree. It
yeah.
is the most
So
vulnerable space that you can
yeah.
ever be in. It's the most important space.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much alchemy can happen when you're like with the right partner too. Like, oh, it's
Absolutely.
it's absolutely amazing. I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been a wonderful like we went in so many directions, but I
So
love
many.
but I loved it. It was amazing.
Me too.
But where can people find you? I mean, I'm gonna link it in the show notes, but where can people
Yeah.
find you and your amazing work?
So you can find me on Facebook, and it's just facebook.com/Cassandra.Finch28. You can
Wow,
find me on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube under Phoenix School of Alignment
amazing.
and
Okay.
phoenixschoolofalignment.com. So yeah,
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, I'm gonna put all your links in the show notes. And thank
thank
you
you.
so much for taking
Thank you for
time to
having
come
me.
on the podcast. We got to do a part two. I feel
Yeah,
like we could talk for
please.
forever.
Days.
And yeah, I know.
Thank you
Well,
so much
thank
for
you.
this.
No, of course. And thanks for
Yeah.
coming on. All
And thank you
right.
to all the listeners.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and stay tuned for the next one.